and months. I actually did some radio last week. The Ravens had a pretty good week while our friend Niels was here from Witten, Germany. 2-0, Steelers can't win, Bengals can't get out of the way of themselves, and I guess that was bad luck for Marvin Lewis in Jersey City on Sunday night. Luke Jones joins us here live via satellite to talk all things Ravens, and how about them Cowboys who, of all the times we playing an 8-1 team on the road, Luke, the Cowboys, I don't want to say that it feels like turmoil, but it feels like A, they're due to lose, and B, that was a hell of a press conference by Tony Romo here this week, right?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't call it turmoil whatsoever, but that was definitely unique to see that. I mean, Tony Romo, if you didn't see it, that was a concession speech. That was him saying that as much as it hurts because I want to play and what I've been through with the injuries, really the last couple of years for him, he was acknowledging that Dak Prescott deserves to be the starting quarterback for that football team. And who could argue with that point with the way the Cowboys have played?
He is like Charlie Brown, isn't he? I mean, literally, right? I mean, that's the Tony Romo story. His whole career, he's a great quarterback, great guy, right? I mean, you can't dislike Tony Romo from everything we've seen, but this feels like, getting the ball pulled out from underneath his feet again, right?
Well, I mean, what it feels like the 2001 Patriots. I mean, Drew Bledsoe was a franchise quarterback at that point in time, and he gets hurt in, week 2?
We would have loved to have had Drew Bledsoe around then, right? I mean, we would have loved to have had a $15 million quarterback instead of what we went through at that point in time, right?
Right. And, Tom Brady comes in, and 15 years later, the landscape and the history of the NFL has changed as a result. But, with Tony Romo, I mean, you do feel for him. He's a guy who's had a reputation for coming up small in some big spots, and there's been a few of those. He's also had quite a few comeback wins in his career that a lot of people have overlooked. But you look at his numbers, I don't think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he's certainly a guy that has much better numbers than he has gotten credit for in his career.
As did Bledsoe, by the way. I know there's been a whole postmortem on his career, and you look back and you're like, well, he slung it around a little bit now, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tony Romo now after this season. I mean, does he wind up in a place like Denver, for example? I mean, some people have already speculated that, but that aside, which Tony Romo, barring an injury, is not going to factor into this Ravens-Cowboys game on Sunday. You have a young quarterback who certainly has a lot going for him. As the best offensive line in football, as a fellow rookie in Zeke Elliott, who has been tremendous, looks like the best running back talent we've seen in the league since Adrian Peterson, going back almost a decade ago now. And he has Des Bryant, who's back and healthy after dealing with the injury. So he's got a lot going for him, but boy, has he been impressive. I mean, he has just been efficient. They haven't asked him to do a ton in terms of throwing the ball 50 times a game, but his yards per attempt is really, really good. And he's made plays, and he hasn't turned the ball over. So, this is a Dallas team that I hear what you said on the onset with that it feels like they might be due to lose. Maybe I think there's a danger of a letdown for them considering the emotions and just the craziness that was that Steelers-Cowboys game Sunday evening, that they come back home and they're looking at a Ravens team that is 5-4, but certainly hasn't impressed anyone this year. I mean, let's call a spade, and you do wonder if there is a sense of perhaps some young guys overlooking something, taking something for granted, maybe having a letdown in that regard. But let's not sugarcoat it. This is going to be a huge task for the Ravens to go in there and try to win a football game. They can. I think you can certainly say that the Ravens match up well from a standpoint of they stop the run better than anyone in the league, and this is the top rushing offense in the NFL, but still going to be playing on the road. And I think the big key for this game more than anything else, everyone's going to talk about the Ravens' defense against the Dallas offense. I get that. That's the big storyline in this football game. But my big question is, can this Ravens offense that found a way to score 22 points in the second half against Cleveland, was that the start of a breakthrough for them, or is that merely a product of playing the god-awful Cleveland Browns? That's going to be the big question for me. I think this defense will do a respectable job. I don't think they're going to shut out Dallas, but the big question is, can this Ravens offense do enough against the Dallas defense that isn't great, but it's better than a lot of defenses they've faced here over the last 5-6 weeks, and let's face it, the Ravens exactly haven't put up a lot of points against some of those other mediocre defenses.
All right, let's get on to who's going to play and who's not going to play, right? Because that's a big part. As much as anything here, we're talking about injuries on the offensive line and consistency within the offense. There's been no consistency with the offensive line. And now Alex Lewis, our friend who actually speaks some German and who we forged a little bond with earlier in the year, he's now going to miss probably the rest of the regular season. Right? Like maybe getting him back at Christmas or New Year's, maybe. And hey, based on what we saw and the way he went down in the game, it'd be a blessing if he goes out there and can play a game before the season's over, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt the way that ankle bent made you think that he had broken fibula, broken ankle, whatever you want to call it. Ends up being a high ankle sprain, which, by the way, isn't a great outcome either. I mean, we can remember years ago Todd Heap missing half a season with a high ankle sprain. So probably some ligament damage in there when you're talking about a high ankle sprain. But Harbaugh said 6 weeks. That at this point, I'd probably be surprised if we see him again. I mean, if like you said, maybe week 17, if they make it into the playoffs, maybe he gets back for the wild card round. But clearly he's not going to be around, and so that one wasn't shocking to learn that on Monday based on the way that looked in that Thursday night game and him being carted off the field. They put the air cast on his ankle, but I think the really sobering news on Monday, and I guess wasn't news on Monday because Harbaugh was pretty mum about it, but understanding that Marshall Yanda missed his third out of four games with this left shoulder injury. We talked about this before the bye. The fact that he had missed 2 games, we knew that this wasn't some minor shoulder issue, a stinger, anything like that. Yanda plays through pain, plays through a tremendous amount of pain as he's done on multiple occasions in his career. So you knew that there was some damage to that shoulder, and played against Pittsburgh, didn't miss a snap, but clear that thing wasn't right. So he misses the Cleveland game, and we're just going to have to see with him. The fact that they haven't put him on IR yet leads you to believe he wants to try to play through this. But the reality is, can he do that? And at what level can he do that? Where his play's not dropping off too much. An 85% Marshall Yanda, still better than most offensive linemen in the league, no doubt about it. But if this is a guy who's 60% of what he normally is physically, then you do question whether it's going to be what's best for him, what's best for the football team. So, with Yanda, it's just going to be a matter of, even gauging his participation in practice probably makes it tough because he's the kind of guy who in the past has missed an entire week of practice and then showed up on Sunday to play. So at this point, it's kind of hard to be optimistic about his status. Maybe he plays this Sunday, maybe it's 2 weeks from now, or maybe he winds up on IR at some point here in the not-too-distant future. But, I think it's just these latest developments are a very real, just a revelation that this offensive line's not going to be solved this year. I mean, it's just not. You hope they can play a little bit better than they did in October when they were dealing with some of the injuries there. The good news, Ronnie Stanley's back. Jeremy Zutta's the only starter they have that hasn't missed a game.
And he got dinged, right? Yeah.
Even though he's been banged up,
yeah.
And you still have Rick Wagner at right tackle, but whether it's going to be John Urschel at left guard, Vlad Dukas started at right guard, Ryan Jensen could be back in the mix. We just know that to this point, that group at less than 100% has not given many reasons to be optimistic. So that's where, despite the fact that the Ravens are in first place, sole possession of first place, only team in the division above 500 going into Week 11, it's still, this is still a pretty unsettling position for their offense to be in as they're trying to get settled, trying to get situated, and trying to get Joe Flacco back on track as well. I mean, we've talked so much about the impact of the offensive line on him. He played better in the second half against Cleveland. It was really good to see that, but I think we all agree he needs to be playing at a much higher level for this offense, for this football team to really go anywhere, knowing that their schedule is going to get tougher here over the final 7 weeks.
Well, there's no doubt that they want to run the football, right? So we're going to talk about this defensive matchup, and we're going to gauge where the defense is. Now, this being said, Suggs looked to be some semblance of his old self. Again, they're playing the Browns, right? Weddle, same thing, involved. The veteran guys getting involved, and then the young guys stepping up. And stopping the run is something they've done pretty well. It's something the Cowboys are going to want to do at home on Sunday. You stop the run, then you open it up to Prescott has to throw the ball around. And this secondary, and you've been writing about this since like I've met you probably like 10 years ago, about the secondary softness at various points. That hasn't been the biggest issue this year, right? I mean, the secondary getting better has probably been the story of why they're in first place.
Well, the secondary being better has been, it's been, a couple things here. We talked about you mentioned Eric Weddle. We've talked about Leslie Frazier. Clearly, Tavon Young, for all of the different corners and defensive backs that the Ravens have taken on day 3 over the last 4 or 5 drafts.
Including our pal Asa Jackson, by the way, who's now back, right?
Right. Asa Jackson, some safeties, Christian Thompson.
Terrence Brooks.
We'll never know about Trey Walker, tragically. But, they never hit on one of those day 3 guys. Tavon Young looks really, really good. And, from day 1, you kind of thought, watching him out in Owings Mills, even in minicamp, that this was a kid who had some ball skills. You thought, okay, might be in the mix as a nickel. Maybe Kyle Arrington, who we thought might be their nickel at that point in time, kind of thought, his job might be in jeopardy. You thought that from day 1, but as time has gone on now, and to see Sharice Wright miss the time that he has with the hamstring issue, he's developed, he absolutely looks like a starting caliber cornerback. He's played at a really high level, especially for a rookie. So it's been really encouraging to see that. Jimmy Smith has played like the pre-injury Jimmy Smith that we were seeing in the second half of 2013.
Like a number 1 pick, right?
Yeah, like a guy that the Ravens invested a long-term contract in a year ago. So it's been good to see that. But what's been amazing, and I've been way more lax on the pass defense. Earlier in the year when Derek Carr did some things against them, Kirk Cousins did some things against them. I've had way more slack in how I've assessed this pass defense, because they haven't gotten a pass rush consistently. They've had their moments. Terrell Suggs has had his moments, but other than him, Matt Judon has flashed. Zadarius Smith finally got his first sack this past game. But overall, they haven't gotten that consistent pressure off the edge on opposing quarterbacks. So it's really been a case where this secondary has had to play coverage. They've had to cover and not necessarily get a lot of help up front in terms of making quarterbacks uncomfortable. So that's where I've been really impressed with this defense. So, the defense is the biggest reason this team's 5-4 right now. There's no doubt about that. They clearly need to get more from the offensive side of the ball. That's obvious. They're playing better teams now. The Browns game is over, that they just were able to enjoy in the second half. First time they've won a game by more than a possession.
And let's be honest, they won because they look good. Those uniforms were better than we thought they were going to be.
They were solid.
I keep going to the front of WNST.net, and I see the flag. You got a picture up there, in one of the panels, and I keep seeing that jersey, and I'm thinking, this is the first time ever that I've wanted to go buy one of those jerseys. Yeah. And it's been 15 years since I bought mine, right? Like, I'm still wearing the 01 patch, right? So I got to get a new jersey at some point. I'm really thinking hard about a Flacco 5 purple. I really am.
Fair enough. Yeah, it was a solid look. But, I think for me, where I am with this defense, from the point we got to 3 or 4 games into the season, I kind of recognize this as being a good defense now. The big question to me is, it's obviously a good defense. Or, first in total defense, first in run defense, first and third down defense.
And somehow Dean Pease isn't a genius, right? When they're going well, you get none of the credit, right?
Yeah, that's the way it always goes. You know that. It's all about the players when they're winning. It's all about the coaches being lousy.
Make sure you bring that up with Dean on Thursday, too. Tell him I said that, okay? Tell him he's getting none of the credit.
But I think for me, it's clear that this defense is very good. Now, this is the point in the schedule when you play Dallas, when you're going to go to New England a few weeks from now, when you're going to be on the road at Pittsburgh, at Cincinnati, Week 16 and Week 17. This is this 2016 defense's opportunity to prove that they belong with some of the top defenses in the history of this franchise. And that bar is ever so high. Forget about the 2000 defense.
Well, every week somebody comes out there with a little purple thing, and whether Saragusa or McCrary's always running around. These Ray Lewis, the legend of all of that It's what the Ravens stand for, right? My friend comes over from Germany. When you say Ravens, he thinks defense, right? I mean, that's what they're known for. But lately, that's been a missing ingredient. But that's, I don't know if we're chasing the 2001 bar. I'm old enough. I remember that team. We're going to be a long time waiting for, a 26-year-old Ray Lewis and a whole bunch of Hall of Famers coming together, right?
Sure. And I'm not saying it's going to be the 2000 defense or the 2001 defense, but can it be what the 2008 defense was? The 2011 defense was really,
what you
really
mean
good
is a
under
top
Chuck
8
Pagano.
defense, top 5 defense, that sort of thing? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, I think they're going to have to play at that kind of level because I don't see this offense with the state of the offensive line and knowing it's probably not going to get much better. Even if you get Marshall Yanda back, you wonder how close he's going to be to being the real Marshall Yanda. There's room for improvement for the offense. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it can't get better, but I still think that's going to be the Achilles heel for this team. So this defense has a chance now to prove against the Dallases, the New Englands, on the road at Pittsburgh after they handled Pittsburgh, whether Ben Roethlisberger was healthy or not, still did a great job against them at home. This is their opportunity to kind of cast their legacy in relation to the other great Ravens defenses of the past. And, if they can carry this team to a division title and, a home playoff game, and then you see what happens after that, then you know what? This defense might go down as one of the better, top 5 defenses, top 6 defenses in the history of this franchise, which, in 21 years wouldn't sound like it's all that impressive, but knowing the standard here, that would be a heck of an accomplishment for this group that doesn't have that Hall of Fame player like a Ray Lewis in his prime or an Ed Reed in his prime. It has a Terrell Suggs at the very end of his career. It has an Eric Weddle who isn't a Hall of Fame player, but a guy who has had a really good career coming over from San Diego. So it doesn't have the same star power of some of those past Ravens defenses. But as I've also reminded, and we've talked about this a lot as well, you got to remember, you can't compare 2016 defense to what you saw in 2000 or 2001 or even 2006 because it's a very different ball game that's played now. We know the rules are catered towards offense. So, the raw numbers themselves, you can't really look at. I think you look at how they're doing against their contemporaries, and when you see 1s and 3s and 5s as far as their ranking kind of across the board as a defense as it relates to the rest of the NFL, you're doing something right. So, it's going to be interesting to see not just how this defense fares against Dallas on Sunday, but as we get into the rest of this schedule that we know it is not going to get any easier.
If they win this kind of a game, doesn't it feel like they need to win this 20-16 or something? They're not going to be winning these 34-31 shootouts, in my opinion, because they're going to have a hard time getting to 34. They need to win these teen kind of games where you go into the fourth quarter and it's a field goal game, not a 10-point game, and certainly not coming from behind with Flacco on the road. Let's talk about the offense a little bit. Luke Jones joining us here. We're getting ready for a trip to Dallas this weekend, and, all the criticism lies at the feet of Flacco, right? And he's the one that gets up in front of us and gives all the reasons and the rhyme. We've talked about the offensive line, but, at some point, skill position guys have to establish themselves as well, right? Like whether it's the running game, we don't even really know who the running back kind of sort of is. It feels like they've always wanted it to be Dixon, but it's settled on it being West, and we're waiting on Dixon a little bit. And it all, as we talked about in the beginning, begins with the offensive line. But, who's going to emerge as a threat amongst these wide receivers and a tight end above and beyond Steve Smith, who still is, quite frankly, a threat, right?
Well, I think you look to what happened in the second half against Cleveland. I mean, you had crossing routes and slants that they started running to Mike Wallace and Brashad Perriman, and Steve Smith in the mix there as well. I mean, it's crazy to think because we talked about it over the last year, what Steve Smith was going to be like coming back from the injury, from the time that he said he was coming back.
You were all waiting for him to turn into Brandon Stokely at the end, right? Like, who's just a guy who's going to catch a ball or 2 or 3, right? But he's not that guy in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, he looked that way in week 1, and we kind of thought, okay, he caught passes, but didn't have the ability to run after the catch. And but from that point on, he's just gotten better and better, and to the point now where he looks exactly like the guy he did the last year or two. Now, he's not 25-year-old Steve Smith, but he's still a very viable wide receiver. But
I've liked every version of Steve Smith in 3 years since he's been here, right? Every healthy version of him. Every time he's been on the field, he looks like he belongs on the field. He's not out there chicken winging it, running around out of will, right? Like that he can't do it. There's not been a point, not a moment, where I've looked at Steve Smith and said, ooh, that's a Willie Mays moment. I really haven't.
Yeah, I mean, have there been some times where maybe he hasn't been at 100% or he's worn down at the end of seasons a little bit? Yeah, but you say that about anyone over the course of any season. Even young players have those moments. You're right. There hasn't been that time where you've thought he's over the hill. But getting back to your point, they need to find some other guys to make plays. Now, Mike Wallace, we haven't talked nearly enough about Mike Wallace this year. I mean, he's been everything they could have asked for and probably then some. As far as what he's been able to do. So, he can catch the verticals. It was nice to see the Ravens do what they did, run some no-huddle, ran some crossing routes, ran some slants against Cleveland. I think that's something you need to see more of against any defense, quite frankly. They haven't done enough to try to get the ball to their speedy receivers in open space. It isn't always just about throwing a vertical 9 route. Sometimes it's about creating something to get the ball to Mike Wallace where he can run. It's not rocket science. Get it to your fastest players and let them run with it. So, it was good to see that. They need to continue to do that. You hope Rashad Perriman getting that first touchdown out of the way he was able to against the Browns. You hope that's a catalyst for him getting more comfortable, him becoming a bigger part of what they do. You always think back to the Torrey Smith example. He had the big game in St. Louis, week 3 of the 2011 season as a rookie, and then from that point on, he was a pretty big part of what they did in their offense. So you hope that
you just want to break out, right? You want to see somebody do something special and say, man, maybe there's another one of those coming next week, right?
Yeah, I mean, you need that because even as good as Steve Smith is and as good as Mike Wallace is, you can't just count on one or two guys to make all of your plays all the time. We're not talking about a Julio Jones here. We're not talking about an A.J. Green kind of talent here. I mean, these are very good, these are good players. Don't get me wrong, but these aren't special talents at this point. Steve Smith has had a special career. I don't know if
he's done nothing here to make himself not a Hall of Famer. If anything else, if anybody here has been watching, it's almost sort of like, I don't want to say rubber stamped it because it's never a rubber stamp when you're a 5'9" or 10 wide receiver, but this is what you want to see out of a Hall of Famer at the end. This sort of battle to the finish line, coming back from this injury. It makes, if I were a voter, if I ever get that card in Canton, this would be what I would argue, is that I saw him the last 3 years in Baltimore, and he looked like a Hall of Famer, even at the end. I mean, even in week 11 of his 37th year, he's out there against Cleveland, scattering around, making people miss, and doing the type of things that he did when he was 27,
Well, I mean, I think he's a Hall of Famer. He's probably going to have to wait because that's how it goes for most guys. I mean,
but you're saying
I don't think
10 years from now he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I don't think he's a first ballot guy, probably, most likely, because I've seen, the Tim Browns of the world after
Sharp.
Right. So, but that aside, they got to have some other guys start to emerge. That's why it was good to see what Perriman did. That's why it was good to see what Darren Waller did. I mean, I love Dennis Pitta. I think it's great that he's been able to come back in the way he has, but they needed another tight end who can pick up some yards after the catch. They need a guy who can be a little bit of a matchup nightmare inside the red zone. And I don't know if Darren Waller will be that guy, but he has the physical tools that he could be that kind of player. So it was good to see him make the catches that he did last Thursday night and catch the touchdown. But we've talked so much about the passing game. They've thrown the ball a ton this year, and we know it hasn't been as efficient as it has needed to be. A lot of that's on the offensive line. A healthy portion of that has to be on Joe Flacco, and a sizable portion of that is on the wide receivers. And the play calling is kind of interlaced throughout all of that. So, but they need to be able to run the football, and they just haven't done that with near enough consistency this year. So, with the injuries that they're dealing with, it's going to be hard to see, how that goes. I think they can have some success. I think they can have enough success there. But, when you're 9 games into the season and you're averaging 3.5 yards per carry and, you really haven't run the ball nearly as effectively as they did their last couple games under Mark Trestman, which he got fired in part because of the running game. It just kind of speaks to where they are as a running offense. So they're chasing it. You like what you saw from Kenneth Dixon against Cleveland. You hope he can continue that. He certainly looked more explosive than he had at any point since the preseason when he hurt his knee. So these are just these are all things that they're chasing. And you know what? All these maybes, all these ifs, all these possibles, all these possibilities, they're not all going to work out. But if they can at least get a few of those things to click here over the next 6 or 7 weeks, it's only going to improve their chances. I mean, I think stating the obvious at this point, barring something completely unforeseen, meaning dramatic improvement from the Ravens or Pittsburgh, or at this point Cincinnati would have to run the table, no one in this division is going to win 10 games. I mean, it's looking like 9-7 is going to win this division at this point.
Well, it's also looking like it's going to be a pretty exciting week between Christmas and New Year's because somebody can go in there and win 2 games and win the division, right? I mean, somebody, or they can just all split it all up 1-1-1, and then it goes to those tiebreakers, and Marvin losing by a point in the Meadowlands on Monday night, and that crazy tie they had a couple weeks ago. I mean, the Ravens are, for as much as we bitch for the 4-game losing streak, for all that's gone wrong, and all that we sat here and torn apart about veteran players and counting on them, and injuries, and the O-line, and Flacco, and the running game, and all of that stuff. If the season ends today, they're playing a playoff game, and I feel good about that. I feel really good that we're going into November, and they might get their ass kicked in Dallas this week. They may go up to New England and lose by 4 touchdowns, but they might not, and they have earned the opportunity to be in this thing right now, and it's an exciting year. Is it great football? No. Are they a great team? Hell no. Can they put something together here that looks like something that gets them into January, and then you take your chances with Joe Flacco in Oakland, or Joe Flacco in Denver, or Kansas City, or Houston, or whatever godforsaken place they'll wind up? Give me a playoff game in January. Show me that they can't play in January. I'd love to know that.
Well, and remember the way it's shaping up. I mean, I'd be shocked if anyone from the AFC North is winning a wild card at this point, given what the AFC West looks like. They'd have a home game. They'd be hosting one of those AFC West teams that might have.
That's a good point. Man, Denver, you're coming here. How about you, Kansas City? Come on in here for a little while.
It'd be like that 2003 scenario where Tennessee was 12-4 and came in and beat the Ravens in Baltimore. I mean, as far as just that kind of a possibility. But the reality is, this is a lousy AFC North. I mean, it's bad. You look at.
Thank God for that.
I mean, it is.
I don't think that wasn't lost on me this weekend watching those games.
It is a bad division. The AFC North right now, 7-19-1 in non-division games. Now, Cleveland takes up accounts for 7 of those losses, but even take them out of the equation. 7-12-1 in non-division games. Still the worst winning percentage of any division in the NFL. I mean, this is a bad division this year, but that said, the Ravens have taken advantage of it much better than Pittsburgh has or Cincinnati has, and I mean, we don't even need to mention the Cleveland Browns right now. So, they're in position that they're going to be playing meaningful football. Now, we've talked about that schedule all year long. That schedule, in some ways, it's funny because you look at it and say, well, Pittsburgh's not as good as you thought they would be, and maybe the Steelers get it straightened out. Maybe they don't. They lost Cam Hayward for the year to a pectoral injury, so that's a major loss to their defense. So
one more guy won't be playing on Christmas Day, right?
Yeah. So Cincinnati. I mean, you look at them right now, 3-5-1. They've got a lot of work to do. I mean, that looks like a team that's going nowhere, quite frankly. Maybe they turn it around, but it's looking like that window shut with the stupidity of Vontaze Burfict and the playoff loss last year. Sad to say for Marvin Lewis. But the Ravens, on the flip side, so you say those games look much more reasonable now. You have a Miami team that has won 4 in a row and is looking a lot better than they did at the beginning of the year. So you kind of wonder, okay, what are the Dolphins all about? And you have a Philadelphia Eagles team that just beat Atlanta, one of the best teams in the NFC, held them under 20 points. So you have 2 home games against those 2 teams that you feel good about because they're at home, but those don't look like the gimmies that they look to be 3 months ago. So we know about Dallas. We know about New England. I mean, those games are going to be extremely difficult to win. Not impossible because it's the NFL, but it's not going to be easy. But there really isn't a game left on the schedule now. Now that they took care of Cleveland on the Thursday night game, there's not a game left on the schedule that you can say is a gimme for the Baltimore Ravens at this point. On the flip side, because they have such a good defense that is flirting with greatness at this point, the numbers are the numbers. They don't lie. On the flip side, you can't count them out of any of these games at this point. And the one thing we've seen with this Ravens team, even going back to last year, even against teams that are clearly better than them, they compete for the most part. It's rare when they don't. The only time last year when they didn't compete is when Joe Flacco and a number of other real players were done for the season.
And they still beat Pittsburgh, by the way. I like to bring that up.
They did. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. As you said, it's not the best brand of football in the AFC North. I think it's 7 of the previous 8 years the AFC North has sent at least 2 teams to the postseason. Not looking like that's going to happen this year.
As long as we're the only ones that get sent, right?
Yeah.
And you won't get sent, to your point.
And here's another one for you. I went back and looked at it, wrote about this at WNST.net, just talking about how down this division is. You have to go back to 1990, counting the old AFC Central, just continuing the history there, because Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Ravens, that continuation when they realigned in 2002. But you have to go back to 1990 to find a division winner that didn't reach the 10-win plateau. It was the Bengals at 9-7 in 1990. I'm guessing we're going to see that stretch come to an end this year because the Ravens would have to go 5-2, knowing what they're facing in their final 7 games. Unless they get a heck of a lot better than they've been all year, hard to envision that. Pittsburgh would have to go 6-1. Cincinnati would have to go 7-0. So it's looking like 9-7 is kind of the benchmark that you're shooting for at this point. And the Ravens, hey, they're ahead of the other 2 in the race for 9 wins. So I got to like their chances, even understanding what lies ahead with that schedule.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke on Twitter. You can also reach him, Luke at WNST.net. Me, I'm a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me anytime, anywhere. The Buy a Toyota Audio Vault there for you 24 hours a day. You can download podcasts, listen when you want, how you want, where you want. We're also out on YouTube and our Facebook Live, and there's notifications for that, so we pop up as we go. We'll be doing a lot of radio here this week and getting you ready. I'll be heading to Dallas this weekend after a whirlwind tour. So much kindness coming our way this week in what has been an ugly week in the history of our country, I believe. But better days are ahead, and that's why we're headed to Dallas. Who knows? Somebody lend me a gun. I'll take it with me. Let's see. Last but not least, anything that you need is in the morning newspaper. Planet Fitness brings that to you each and every morning. It is powered up by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com. The morning newspaper, sign up 7 a.m. It hits your email inbox. And if there's any breaking news, and there always is, especially with the Orioles being back after it now. I was in New York. I was in Philadelphia over the weekend in D.C. There was Orioles news. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colossus, always here for you on Thursday, driving you home as well from 3 until 5, getting you ready for Thursday night football and a weekend of football as well. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live. And we're always at Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills each and every Monday night with the best seat in the house. We'll be out there this Monday, freshly back from Dallas, and hopefully a victory over the 8-1 Cowboys. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.